I guess it connected with so many people, and like I always presumed we would be kind of like a cult band.
This is the story of a group of pals from Glasgow who formed a band and changed the face of British music.
We were celebrating. There was something to celebrate, like, every day.
A band who started off playing gigs in friends' bedrooms and soon found themselves performing at the Grammys and touring the world to millions. It's a story of risk, intuition and reinvention, told for the first time by the band themselves in exclusive new interviews with a little help from their friends, collaborators and those they've inspired.
Take me out!
It just felt like a really exciting time. Like, where the hell is this going to go?
And it was like, what is going on right now? Like, what? How are we gonna get our foot in the door when there's another, seemingly there's this other beast?
Yeah, I was wondering if you're going to bring that up.
I'm Rose Matafeo, comedian, writer, actor, and Franz Ferdinand mega fan. Here to show my love for the band after I was kicked off their official internet message board as a teenager. But all is forgiven. This is Words So Leisured, the story of Franz Ferdinand. Part 3. You could have it so much better. It's late 2004, the year that Franz Ferdinand broke and went from art school party band to Mercury Prize-winning phenomenon. Home for the band now is a hotel room, an airport lounge, or the stage itself. And for the most part, that's exactly how they wanted it. Guitarist Nick McCarthy.
Yeah, we were pretty much celebrating all the time, really. Like, for young guys flying around the world and playing concerts, meeting people. I mean, it's just, a total dream. I mean, it's like what everyone dreams of, probably.
But the good times can be just as exhausting as when things aren't going your way. Offers were coming in from all over the world, and as bassist Bob Hardy remembers, Franz Ferdinand were not a band that liked to say no.
We refused to see it or talk about it as work because it seemed like such an incredible opportunity. How many people possibly get to do this that we would just say yes to everything. Like, well, yeah, of course we'll do that. It wasn't that long that we were sitting in Alex's kitchen. So it's like, well, yeah, if someone come along to us and said, do you want to do a breakfast session on some radio station in New York? Well, yeah. So we were saying yes, we'd do everything. So yeah, we were exhausted, but I don't think we really understood how tired we were.
Band manager Cern Canning.
There was a period in, I guess, March, April of that year, of 2004, where we knew what we were going into. But we had something like 25 shows in 30 days, and then things started to come in. And I think a historian might pick me up on this, but it was for example, we got offered Morrissey's 45th birthday party in Manchester. He was doing a show and he invited the band to play. Luckily, we were available, but we were somewhere else. So we had to come back from Europe, do that show. Then I think we got offered the MTV Awards. So I think it ended up being 31 shows in 30 days. We ended up doing more than a show a day for a month. And it was bananas. But all of us were open-eyed, but people were genuinely shattered. And I think Paris probably fell a bit later than that, but it would have been the culmination of that.
November 4th, 2004, Paris. The moment the band's relentless schedule reached breaking point at an arena venue called the Zenith.
Yeah, I was wondering if you're going to bring that up. I think we should talk about it, yeah.
The events of the Zenith in Paris are both comic and tragic in equal parts.
Drummer Paul Thompson.
Zenith was like a 5-band bill. It was us, the Kills, who we were on tour with, the Zootons, and then opening was the Killers. Played like 20 minutes at the start.
The gig, I don't know, didn't go that well or something, and after the gig there was like a big punch up, between the band, and I couldn't believe it.
And it was over something very, very petty. I can't even remember. And the whole dressing room was rocking because it was a porta cabin round backstage, and in France, like they invite generally all the media and journalists sort of come backstage. So there's basically the entire French media was outside the dressing room.
It probably sounded very comical from the outside. I heard that the porter cabin was actually shaking, just the sound of things smashing.
And the record label had got Hedi Slimane from Dior to design us a gold disc that they wanted to present to us. And so our tour manager came in and kind of, was like, you have to go and get this disc. Our manager, so we were like, okay.
So we paused the fight, went out, got our gold disc, said thank you very much, went back in the porter cabin and started thumping each other again.
All fuming, all that. And then so we got these things like, merci. And then we went back in and started fighting again.
Jarvis Cocker was waiting in the production office because we were going to be writing some songs for the Harry Potter film with him, and we were going to be the band. And so he was waiting for this meeting, but we were just fighting. And I wasn't really involved in the fighting, I have to say. I'm not really that kind of guy. So I popped out briefly into the production room, production office, and Jarvis was sitting there. He was like, "Oh, hi, we're going to work on some tunes." And I was like, "Yeah, mate, maybe."
And then I kind of stormed out with like a sort of kind of shirt all torn and all that, and just what looked like about 100 people all like staring at me, all standing around this porter cabin. And then I got outside and I was kind of sitting just like seething. And then the girl from the Zootons went past and she went, "Boss gig, by the way." And I was like, "Oh, thanks very much." And then, even while I'm in the middle of all this, like kind of everything's just normal on the outside.
When you were as stressed out as we were at that time, when you'd been touring without a break and your nerves are shattered, it was too much. And I guess the fight was probably triggered by something very trivial, but on top of everything, the whole thing exploded.
Today, the Zenith fight feels more comedy than tragedy, but it was a serious test for the band. In fact, it very nearly ended things there and then. Just 9 months on from releasing their debut album, Franz Ferdinand were on the verge of splitting up. Paul Thompson again.
Yeah, and I was ready to just like go home at that point. I was quite upset. And then we a couple of days later, me and Alex just went for a walk, kind of patched things up. But I think we called off like a couple of things, and the label and management were just still pushing for us. I think it was to do a TV show in Germany, and we're like, "That we're not doing this TV show." It's just like, we've had enough. We're gonna, we're seriously going to break up, and I don't think they believed us.
Yeah, no, it was really serious, and then it took probably a few weeks of healing. I presume we pulled a few things out to reflect the realities that they were all burnt out, and then got on with it. But it was a major thing.
It sounds very dramatic, and it was dramatic, and it was kind of harrowing as well as amusing, heartbreaking as well as absurd. But we survived it. We got through.
As they dusted themselves down and got back to touring, the band were also keen to get back into the studio to start work on their second album. Bob Hardy.
It felt like, because we were going back-to-back tours where we'd do a tour of the UK, do a tour of the States, come back, do a tour of Europe, go back to the UK and do a bigger tour of the UK with bigger venues, go to Japan, come back, go back to the States, do a tour of the States with bigger venues. We've done like 3 tours of the States by this point with this record, that I think we were feeling, are we not milking this a bit? Should we not like, this seems like mad. We're going back to the States? But then, our manager would be explaining, yeah, but you've sold 1 million records. So like, if you think about it, you've only played to like 40,000 people so far. And can't we just like make some new music? And so we started sort of in vain kind of like setting up rehearsal rooms inside venues, Which, yeah, it was a nice idea, but we were just absolutely wiped out. I mean, I was just like completely burnt out by this point, drinking too much. Exhausted. Didn't really know, and lost all kind of judgment about anything. So I don't know. I don't know what, if anything, we wrote ended up on a record. I mean, maybe I'm Your Villain. Maybe that was written in a venue somewhere.
When I would look back at the bands that I loved, which had inspired me, and I would see the rate at which they released albums. I would look at the Smiths' back catalogue. They would do an album in 1984, then another one would come out in 1985, then later in 1985 another one would come out, then another one, and the same with the Beatles, Rubber Soul would come out, and then 8 months later Revolver would come out. It's like why the fuck can't we do that? I want to do that as well. Well, the reason we couldn't do that was because every minute of the day we spent touring, and while it was great to travel the world and get to go to all those places and play those gigs, I feel a little bit bitter about it, because there was something really special with what we were and what we were doing, and that time of creativity was squandered. So I was intensely frustrated. I wanted to be back there, and I wanted to be creating, and I wanted to get it out. And the reason I wanted to get it out was not so we could go back on the road again. It was just so we could do another one afterwards. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write music, and I wanted to record it and then write more.
That was probably a mistake, I think, that we made. We should have written more. I think we should have written more. We should have taken more time to record.
In February 2005, the band did take time to record. At Alex's home just south of Glasgow, they started to make album number 2, You Could Have It So Much Better. Sessions were juggled with collecting Brit Awards, more shows and interviews, and opening the Grammys with a mashup performed alongside the Black Eyed Peas, Gwen Stefani, and Maroon 5. It sounds like a bizarre night, and is one that Paul Thompson remembers fondly. Sort of.
I can remember booking a day room in a hotel next to the Staples Centre, ironing our clothes and listening to comedy albums, and that was literally my favourite part of the day. The rest of it was pretty hellish. And yeah, we did the red carpet, and there was I think James Brown was there, and Hulk Hogan, Jerry Lee Lewis, and it was like Madame Tussauds on acid, and at the point where we got up to the banks of photographers, they all you could tell that loads of them didn't know who we were, and somebody had to hold up a sign. They're all like, oh, okay, Franz Ferdinand. And the backstage area was dry as well, so obviously at this point we were just probably functioning alcoholics, and so we had to smuggle in whiskey and everything and drink them out of water bottles, and played a verse and a chorus from Take Me Out, then sat in the audience. Kanye did Jesus Walks with these mum on stage and stuff. I can remember that. Don't remember much else. Went to a party, the Roosevelt Hotel afterwards. Met Ricky Martin. Had a panic attack. Went home. Went back to my hotel.
Back home in Glasgow, their friends who had witnessed their rapid rise from the very beginning watched on with pride and amusement. Friends like Scott Patterson from the band Sons and Daughters.
Someone we know is at the Grammys. That's who, for nowadays it's your Ariana Grandes, and your, in those days it would have been Britney Spears and things like that, so it was wild, and just so happy for them, because like I said, they were so down to earth and weren't really letting it affect them. It was just kind of hilarious to go from the Chateau to playing a stage with the Black Eyed Peas and Maroon 5 in the space of 2 years probably. Crazy.
You Could Have It So Much Better went straight to number 1 in September 2005, which only made everything bigger. The parties, the attention, and definitely the shows.
I do remember Franz headlining Reading festivals, and as they were going up to the stage, Nick and I were chatting, And I said, "Oh, are you feeling nervous?" And he said, "No, it's fine." And I think there were about 50,000 people in front of the stage. And he said, "I was far more nervous when you came to our first rehearsal."
The record featured the singles Do You Want To, The Fallen, Walk Away, and Eleanor Put Your Boots On, as well as fan favourite Outsiders, which became the band's closing song in their live set. They toured the record hard, of course, this time in arenas. And then, finally, the band were ready to take their first proper break. Let us make the most of this rare downtime with a short interlude about an element of the band that has always been as potent as the music itself. Their all-important aesthetic, from the way they dress to how they're determined to make every show feel like a special event.
This is Brandon Flowers. I am the singer for The Killers from Las Vegas, Nevada. I still distinctly remember an image of them that was in a magazine. And it was just like, it was kind of another blow, because you already had the Strokes and they looked fantastic and they sounded fantastic. And now here was this other group, from this place that we revered from Great Britain. And they were getting compared to Blondie and Roxy Music and the Talking Heads, and it was like, what is going on right now? Like, wait, what? How are we gonna get our foot in the door when there's another, seemingly there's this other beast? And I had heard about Take Me Out, but I still hadn't heard it, and so I just remember I was jealous before I had even heard that song because of the way that just because of what it was written about them and the way they looked.
Former editor of Enemy magazine, Conor McNicholas.
They'd really crafted the way that they appeared rather than just kind of, turning up with whatever they'd grabbed off the bedroom floor. Franz set the template really for what was expected of a band. So that level of intelligence, the craft that goes into the live shows, not being embarrassed about putting together a look because they understood that, this was showmanship. There was a showbiz aspect to it.
Our permission came from being from Las Vegas. That was the way that we were able to put on the shows that we eventually were able to put on. It's sort of we looked to that place where we were from, and I think they were coming again from another angle, but they were putting on great shows, and there was a sense of occasion. And that was something that had been missing in rock and roll, I felt like, for a long time. I wasn't feeling that in what was happening in music at the time. I guess I'm not, it's no secret for everyone. And, it's without trashing what was going on before them. There just had been a sort of a desert,
That's the other thing that felt revolutionary. Not just the sound, not just the songwriting, but everything, like the way the band would perform. And these were the things that I talked about with Bob. And part of it was rebellion, and part of it was novel ideas. But like things like this idea of meeting the eye of the audience, like the opposite of the shoegaze thing. Like it was like, no, I'm always going to engage directly with the audience. Kind of like almost like you would do with a wild dog or a bear or something like that. Like you'd stare them in the eye till they either ate you or they fucked off.
We wanted the artwork to be good, obviously. We were really into the Russian constructivist kind of vibe, and so we just started heavily borrowing from that. And then we wanted to make, back originally when we first started talking about a band, we wanted to make gigs seem like a special occasion. So we would try and dress smartly, or dress like, if you were going for a night, like a special night out. We were all kind of into that, really. Yeah, we all have impeccable taste.
I couldn't agree more. But now, back to the music.
cried, crushed the end within my stride. Said I'm strong.
The band had more than earned their time off, as they reflected on all they'd achieved in such a short period of time. By late 2007, they were ready to think about their third album and a new way of working. And what could be more different than an album made with an out-and-out pop producer? Alex Kapranos.
I wanted to really collaborate with somebody that felt unexpected, that would challenge us in a way that we weren't used to. And I was aware of what Brian Higgins was doing with Xenomania.
Xenomania is Higgins' production group, who by this point had written and produced a raft of hits for Girls Aloud, S Club 7, Kylie Minogue, and Cher.
And so we met up with Brian, and he was an odd character, but it felt kind of cool. And we worked on Know You Girls together, and I liked his approach. I'd always thought of songs in quite a modular way, of just being sections that you can like pull apart and sort of stick together. You know, I talked about Darts of Pleasure and like bringing in two completely unconnected sections and just banging them together to make something new. And that's something that I'd seen Brian doing in Xenomania. Like some of those Girls Aloud songs, the different sections are totally unrelated to each other musically. And when we talked, it was really exciting. And like creatively, I felt a connection with him, and I felt that there was something good there. So we went to a studio in London. We worked on Know You Girls, and yeah, he really got it, and it was really fun. Then we went to his place. Now, Brian had a house that used to belong to Alice Liddell. Alice Liddell, her parents were friends in the 19th century with, what's his name, Charles Dodson, the Lewis Carroll. So Alice Liddell was Alice in Wonderland, and that's where Brian's house is. It's his back garden is Wonderland, essentially. And it was kind of fascinating to see how he was working. Like he had somebody in one room who was purely writing top lines, you know, like the melody at the top of a song, somebody working purely on beats. But then it was kind of a little bit absurd. There were a couple of girls that would come down from London every day to tell the lyricists the latest street slang so they could put it into songs and sort of thing.
Nick McCarthy again.
And he made everyone feel very, very important. You know, he had a way with people, and you just thought, wow, he really takes me seriously and really wants to. But then it got really weird, because then he started. He kept on talking about money. Then, you know, and I don't know. We weren't used to that at all.
I loved his creative processes, but he was driven more by commercial success than by just the pure creation of art, which I think is what we've always been driven by. And so while our processes were similar, they ultimately had different goals. And I'm not criticizing him for those goals, it's just different. But I think he was getting a bit frustrated with us as well. I remember being with Nick, wandering around the graveyard in the village where Brian lives, and just talking about it's kind of like, this isn't really working, is it? So we fucked off back to Glasgow.
And then we went exactly the opposite way.
Fucking off back to Glasgow, Franz Ferdinand returned to their roots. The chateau was long gone, but the city still had plenty of disused buildings waiting to become their new home. The one they settled on was the particularly grand Govan Town Hall, a vast building from the turn of the century that came with its own theatre.
I mean, that was another place we found. Govan Town Hall was just an empty town hall, and it was this huge, like, kind of church space it was a theatre, an old theatre was in there as well. I mean, it was a total dream, you know. We could go on stage, and we could put amps on stage, just mess around in this massive theatre. We had this band, and it was just really cheap, you know. It was like really, it was insane. We were playing like, I think we were playing like 200 quid for a month or something, you know. And it was a whole theatre for us.
First, it became their rehearsal space, and then their recording studio. And on production duties was Dan Carey.
It was a very big deal to me. I was a massive fan, and so really excited at the prospect and quite nervous to meet them, and went and had this great chat.
Dan was exactly the opposite of Brian. What happened was we were flipped from kind of going from this ultimately super pop approach to the total opposite, which was a big sprawling experimentation and as loose as possibly could be. We all decamped to the old town hall in Govan and we experimented.
Govan Hall almost became a fifth member of the band, with Franz recording in its grand hall, the toilets, underneath the stage, and in old carpeted offices, experimenting in every corner of the building to see what sounds it had to offer. At one point, Dan Carey climbed 50 feet into the rafters to swing a microphone from the ceiling to create a Doppler effect on guitar takes.
Just kind of any crazy idea that you could have sonically that you think, man, what would happen if we did that? And just literally trying it out.
But the most frequently used technique was one inspired by an American soul legend, Dan Carey again.
So I'd recently been shown these James Brown recordings of like Sex Machine, but like the actual take when they get that song, what they did is just played the song over and over again for about an hour and a half, and then, you know, about halfway in, there's one thing, and just straight, when you hear it, just straight away, you know that's the one. But it was the repetition that kind of got them into so I thought it'd be an interesting thing to try that. And so we kind of did this thing where when we did Ulysses, it was one of the first ones we did, we set the band up, that was under the stage, but decided to play the verse for like, you know, 20 minutes or half an hour, and then when everyone kind of felt that the groove had been got for that, we would just go on to the bridge. And then when that, for another half hour, when that was got, we'd go on to the chorus, and then, you know, we sort of mapped out the song and just did each. So the full take of Ulysses is about 2 hours long. And I remember it was great, but I hadn't really considered, so Paul's hand was just bleeding afterwards because just playing the same thing really hot. Drumsticks had kind of worn through one of his fingers.
I mean, after a while, you just sort of transcend a little bit. You're not really sort of aware of it. I quite enjoyed it. I quite like music has sort of transcendental properties, and you can kind of lose yourself a little bit. And that's what I like about being on stage. It's just the absolute peace that you have. So being able to sort of get into that state in the studio was, I was all for it.
This is how a majority of Tonight, Franz Ferdinand, was recorded, with the band repeatedly playing sections of songs in search of a magic bar or two. If there was a downside to this approach, it was in how long the album took to make. Nick McCarthy again.
I mean, I really loved that. It's really, really good. But in terms of wanting to record a record a year, that was when we stopped doing a record a year. That's because it took ages doing that record.
Bob Hardy.
Yeah, I had no idea what was going on most of the time, to be honest. We were kind of writing simultaneously in the room and recording. It was permanently night time. I honestly have no idea how long it lasted. Like, I had that session. I don't know how long we were in Govan for.
But that's the story behind the scenes. The public perception of the band was kind of skewed because of what had happened, because it had gotten to the public that we were working with Xenomania, because Brian wanted to tell everybody. Like, we didn't want to tell anybody, but like, you know, we're usually quite private. Like, I don't like to tell the world what's going on during the creative process. I prefer to kind of like arrive with it finished and kind of go, there you go, that's it. Because you don't sit down and totally plan what an album's going to be. You allow the ideas to develop. It's like sketchbook keeping when you're an artist. You develop your ideas, and the ideas that you have at the beginning are not necessarily the ideas that come into the world at the end. So I think it's always best to keep it so. But Brian had leaked that we were working with Xenomania, so the perception amongst the public and journalists in particular was that we were going to make this pop record. And Tonight is probably the least poppy record that we made. I guess Know You Girls is kind of like a poppy melody, but like the sound of the record is something completely different. And so people were expecting to hear this record that sounded like Girls Aloud, and then And then Tonight appeared, and it's nothing like that at all. And so some people wrote about it as if it was this poppy record. It's like, oh yeah, Franz Ferdinand have gone pop. It's like, no, it's not poppy at all. And then others were kind of saying, we were expecting a poppy record and you gave us this. It's like, oh, just see it for what it is.
Tonight, Franz Ferdinand was released on the 26th of January 2009, charting at number 2 in the UK, despite the press confusion about how the album might sound. Today, it's considered one of the band's most sonically diverse records, thanks to the experiments at Govan Town Hall. And you can probably guess exactly what happened next. The band took to the road and extensively toured the world.
Well, yeah, the Tonight tour was most of 2009, and then there was a little bit at the beginning of 2010. We went down to Australia and then South America, and yeah, and then pretty much didn't really speak to Alex or maybe Nick for maybe a year.
The grueling schedule had taken its toll once again, especially on the relationship between Bob Hardy and Alex Kapranos. At the end of 2010, the band regrouped to play 2 shows for their friends Belle and Sebastian at their festival, the Bowley Weekender. But there was no mention of what next, only an unspoken sense that these might be the last 2 shows the band would ever play.
There weren't any plans after the Bowley Weekender to then meet up and start working on music, you know. It was kind of like, I'll see you later then, you know.
Coming up, in the final part of Words So Leisured, the story of Franz Ferdinand.
I didn't know whether we were going to work out how to stop the band or whether we were going to work out our differences and continue the band.
Estranged bandmates Bob Hardy and Alex Kapranos meet on neutral ground to decide the fate of Franz Ferdinand.
If there was a HR department in Franz Ferdinand, you know, a lot of issues would have been resolved, but there isn't.
I remember just saying to her, oh, come on, right, we just need to talk about this.
And the band reinvents itself as 2 members exit and 3 enter.
And then just kind of at one point, Alex was just like, so like, would an international tour be something like of interest to you? And I was just like, yeah, like, obviously.
It re-energized us, I think.
This feels like a great band, a different band.
I'm Rose Matafeo, and this has been part 3 of Words So Leisured, the story of Franz Ferdinand. The series producers are Stuart Stubbs and Greg Cochran. This has been a New Allotment production.